Is addiction ruining your relationship? Whether it's drugs or alcohol or medication, maybe porn, sex or gambling? Then stay with me to have a look at a different and successful approach to recovery. It's a couples-based practice and the research is in. Addiction does not have to mean the end of your marriage or partnership. In fact, it could give you the opportunity to improve your relationship more meaningfully than you've ever experienced. Questioning your partner can be the start of another round of conflict. Have you been drinking again? Why is there a $350 cash withdrawal in our savings account? Can I just look at your phone then? And the questions can keep coming. If I checked your browser history, what would I find? Why do you keep smoking that stuff? Surely you could stop for me and the kids. And these anxiety-driven questions can seem endless. Do you love drinking more than you love me? Where did you go that's made you so late? Why do you keep breaking your promises? Beyond these questions are feelings of anger, fear and anxiety. There's stress, hurt and betrayal, just to name a few. The tension, the blaming and the feelings of shame lead to defensiveness, constant criticism, stonewalling and even contempt. According to the research from the Gottman Institute, these are clear predictors of a relationship that is heading towards breaking up. They call these four responses the four horsemen, and they could be running rampant in your addiction-affected relationship now. You see, misunderstandings, poor communication and personality changes, as well as social withdrawal, emotional numbing and dishonesty can be the result from substance abuse and addiction. These changes have the potential to destroy trust and produce a lot of painful emotional experiences. And you've probably tried so many things to make your relationship better or to turn that addiction around. You may have cried, made promises, shamed yourself or your partner, withheld affection, given the silent treatment, argued, threatened to end the relationship, or left the house for a period of time. And as you know, all these attempts at fixing your situation don't work long term. Here's the reality. Addiction has a huge effect on the one who uses and on their partner, and both of you need support to turn things around. A long-held approach to addiction recovery for someone who is married or in a long-term relationship is for that person with the addiction to go get help. Once they sort out their addiction, everything else will improve. So we can send someone off to rehab, to detox, or enroll them in a program, let out a sigh of relief and hope for the best. But I've seen it time and time again that once the person in recovery comes back into the home or finishes their program, the same old relationship dynamics start to creep back in and both partners find themselves frustrated and often without hope. The blame increases, the arguments escalate, and the disconnection widens. Dr. Kelly Green, author of the workbook Relationships in Recovery, writes, "It's very common for loved ones to blame relationship distress on the addiction. And that idea is often reinforced by movies, recovery meetings, and even treatment providers. But what about the impact that relationships have on addiction? What about the ways that loved ones may be unintentionally making it more difficult for you to stay sober?" Those topics get much less attention, and you may feel guilty even about considering that your relationships have contributed to your substance abuse. Now, this is not a blame statement, it's just a very honest observation about the relationship dynamic that is often present when addiction is affecting a couple. The addictive behaviour triggers a reaction by the partner, which in turn triggers a reaction by the person in recovery. And until the dysfunction of a couple's relationship is addressed and given support, that cycle will just keep happening. Dr. Robert Navarra, who wrote a course for professionals called Couples and Addiction Recovery as part of the Gottman Institute, he says relationship health and wellness is one of the strongest predictors of successful long-term recovery. Humphreys, Moos and Cohen conducted a study to determine what predicted successful long-term recovery at 3 and 8 years after primary treatment, and found that a satisfactory family relationship is one of the best predictive variables for long-term sobriety. Combining and integrating individual and family treatment methodologies appears to maximize chances for long-term successful recovery. For recovery to work long-term, couples need support individually and together to develop their relationship skills, including communication, conflict resolution, and rebuilding trust, just to name a few. And the evidence backs this up. So let's have a quick chat about rats. Johann, author of Chasing the Scream, did a brilliant TED talk about addiction, which popularised the research of Dr. Bruce Alexander and his rat park. Let's listen to an interview with Johann and then come back to Dr. Alexander's work.
Take a rat and you put it in a cage and you give it 2 water bottles. One is just water and the other is water laced with either heroin or cocaine. If you do that, the rat will almost always prefer the drugged water and almost always kill itself. So there you go, that's our story, right?
But that's an open and shut case. That's what they thought. Is that the case? Is that true?
Well, in the 70s, Professor Alexander came along and looked at these experiments and said, well, hang on a minute. We put the rat alone in an empty cage where it's got nothing to do except use these drugs. Let's do this differently. So he built a cage that he called Rat Park, which is basically like heaven for rats, right? They've got loads of cheese, they can have loads of sex, they've got coloured balls, which apparently rats love.
Sounds perfect.
Exactly, coloured balls, what more could you want? And they've got both the water bottles, the normal water and the drugged water. But this is the fascinating thing. In Rat Park, they don't like the drugged water. They almost never use it. None of them ever use it compulsively. None of them ever overdose. Now, there's a lot of human examples I can give if you want, but what this tells us is when they have bad lives, where they have nothing that gives their life meaning, they will be very likely to compulsively use drugs. When they have good lives, they're extremely unlikely to compulsively use drugs. The opposite of addiction is not sobriety, the opposite of addiction is connection.
The opposite of addiction is not sobriety, the opposite of addiction is connection. I love this. The main goal of addiction recovery is not about getting people to stop using. It is about helping them become more connected. And this is why couples coaching and counselling is essential, not only for the recovery of the person who uses, but also for the recovery of the relationship. We have to work on the connection and heal the disconnection. Dr. Bruce Alexander calls this the dislocation theory of addiction. In his book, The Globalization of Addiction, he writes, addiction is neither a disease nor a moral failure, but a narrowly focused lifestyle that functions as a meagre substitute for people who desperately lack psychosocial integration. Now, psychosocial integration is just a fancy way of saying connection. Alexander goes on to say, addiction is a way of adapting to sustained dislocation. If addiction is a way of adapting to dislocation, individuals should be able to overcome their addiction if their psychosocial integration is restored. It's about connection. We cannot overcome addiction for the long term if we do not address the relationship part of our lives. I'm convinced that working together as a couple is so necessary to address the effects and pain that have been caused by addiction and that have led to the addiction. This is why I've developed this evidence-based approach to addiction recovery around the whole mantra that the opposite to addiction is not sobriety, the opposite of addiction is connection. It's about helping you connect with yourself, connect with your partner, and connect with your purpose. Yes, it can be very confronting, but this does work when you do the work. I've seen couples on the brink of divorce and separation not only restore their relationship, but also recover from their addiction at the same time. It's so encouraging to be able to give this realistic hope, as well as a serious chance to turn your relationship around. So, does addiction have to ruin your relationship? That is a resounding no from me. Before you go, if you enjoyed this video and want to see more, please feel free to like this video and subscribe to my channel. I'll be working to bring you more videos around the area of addiction recovery for individuals and couples every 2 to 3 weeks. Also, you'll find links to the different resources I refer to during my video in the description below. And if you'd like to find out more about me and my work, you can go to my website at unhooked.com.au.